The present moment pivot can be looked at broadly and also in a more narrow form, which will be the primary focus of this video. Broadly speaking, the present moment pivot, a phrase that I coined to remind us of the ways that we can, on purpose or as can happen spontaneously, become more fully engaged in our present moment experience. Essentially, we're pivoting from wherever we might be in our minds and in our bodies, lost in thinking about the future, reflecting on the past, whether it's useful or maybe not so helpful, nonetheless not as fully present as we can be, and we can pivot our way back to that present moment frame. And it draws upon a counting practice, a focused attention practice, and it can also include a manipulation or slowing down of the breath that can be helpful not just for mindfulness and the cultivation of greater present moment awareness, but also relaxation. And that brings us to the end of the first minute of this video segment. And the reason I say that is because the present moment pivot practice itself takes about a minute. Of course, it can be done for longer, and it could even be done for shorter, but we could say the unit of analysis or the unit that we are working with is 1 minute. And there's a variety of reasons for that. In a few minutes or a few moments, I will share with you specifically the practice instructions. But why a minute? Because as we develop a mindfulness practice and we sit for longer than a minute, as we often will, it can be very helpful to become familiar with and comfortable with what it means to be present for the passage of a minute. Sometimes the minutes fly by, and sometimes they can seemingly take forever. And so we practice the present moment pivot for a variety of reasons, but one of them is so that we can become very comfortable and familiar with sitting and being present for the passage of a minute. And that brings us to the end of the second minute of this video. And now I'll provide you with some specific instruction on the present moment pivot practice. I'll do so first without regard to breathing. So that means that you'll be breathing however you'll be breathing while you're doing this particular count in your mind. And I'll then share with you a variation that involves coordinating a slower, deeper breath with the count. That can be very helpful for feeling more relaxed and calm as a part of the practice. And it's the way that I almost always will do the practice. But I'll share with you both of them, both by explaining it and then by demonstrating it in a video so that you can watch what it would look like, should that be helpful to you. And I'll also provide you with some tips so that you can begin to get the timing down. It's not crucial that it takes a minute to go through the present moment pivot practice, but there are ways of learning to pace yourself as you do the count, especially when you bring breathing formally into it, which can be very helpful to do as you're learning it. So with that, let me now explain the present moment pivot practice. So what we do is we're essentially counting from 1 to 72, slowly, so that it takes about a minute to get there. And to do so, we would be essentially taking 5 seconds to get from 1 to 6, and then continuing that 5 seconds for each 6 count movements that we make. But rather than count from 1 to 72, which carries a lot of possible pitfalls, like you just fall into automatic pilot and you're just counting and you're not even aware, what we do is we've orchestrated or structured it so that it involves counting from 1 to 6 a series of times, enough times that essentially would be counting to 72. And so it involves counting from 1 to 6, but doing it by counting from 1 to 6 a series of times, and it looks like this. Now, the reason why this can be helpful is because you have to keep in mind the count. You have to know if you're at 1 or 2 or 3 or 4, and you also have to know whether you're in the first or the second version of 1, the first or second version of 2, and there are many little pitfalls that you'll find so that where attention is not really zeroed in on the practice and where one is not as vigilant as they could be, they'll likely realize, you'll likely realize, I will realize that my mind has wandered because I will forget where I am or I will skip over something. And that's where the practice in this form can be very, very helpful. Alrighty, now what I'd like to do is speak to how it is that we can integrate the breathing into this practice, which can make it a relaxation practice as well as a focused attention, mindfulness, training of attention practice. So when we're doing the practice without regard to the breath, you'll be breathing in and out at whatever rate you are, independent of counting from 1 to 6 and then 1 to 6 again as you then work your way to 6. But when we bring the breath into it formally, what we do is we slow down the in-breath so that while we're counting from 1 to 6, we are inhaling. And then when we're counting from 1 to 6 again, we're exhaling. And then when we say 2, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, as we advance towards 6, we're inhaling. And then we're exhaling. So that by the time we get to 6, we will have taken 6 inhalations and 6 exhalations. Over the course of a minute, a breathing cycle of 6 breaths per minute has been found to be, on average for many people, very conducive to feeling more relaxed, as well as feeling more concentrated and steadying our attention. And importantly, should you find that going a little faster, that is to say not going that slow, is more comfortable for you, by all means, don't go that slow. If you find that going slower is comfortable, then by all means, go a little slower. But I think most people will find that for the course of about a minute, to slow down the breath in this way can be quite useful. All right, so in a little bit, you'll see me demonstrating it. You don't need to see me demonstrating it to get it. You probably get it now, and you can begin to practice it. But to the extent that watching it would be helpful, I offer that to you for that purpose. And before we move on to the demonstration itself, I'd like to share with you some tips and some applications. One tip is this: to really get the pacing down, if you have a watch with a second hand or a timepiece with a second hand, to have it where you're looking at the watch as it ticks off the seconds and see what it's like to, and get used to getting the count to 6 within 5 seconds. And that would be like this: 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 2, 2, 3, and so on. And if you're looking at a second hand as it works its way around the dial, you'll find that you can internally say that to yourself as you watch it go, and that will keep you pacing yourself nicely and evenly, and in time you'll get that rhythm down. But if you were to do it a little bit faster, a little slower, that's fine too. Okay, so that's a tip. You also can have it where if you have like a minute timer and you don't want to be, or you feel that you're comfortable with the general pacing, you can use the timer and turn it over and do the practice and find that when you get to the end of the 6 count, you've also probably exhausted the minute timer. So there's a variety of ways that you can begin to get it down, to get to know that minute, to become familiar with the passage of a minute, and to have it be something that is, second nature. Okay. Now, in terms of application, really, you'll begin to find, I believe, for yourself, times and moments when you'll want to practice it. So I'm not going to try to suggest some exhaustive list of things, nor am I intending to suggest those that you necessarily need to draw upon. But as examples, one is you're in traffic and maybe you're a little frustrated or you're stuck in traffic. Your mind might be thinking about traffic or thinking about something else, and you say, you know what, 1, 2, 3, especially as you bring the breath into it, and you'll find that that might be useful or interesting. It's also a way to practice the present moment pivot. You're in line waiting for food, coffee, practice the present moment pivot. You are talking with someone, maybe it's getting a little agitating for some reason, you want to interrupt, or you're bored and your mind is wandering, practice the present moment pivot. You'll find that it's simple enough, especially as you become familiar with it, that it doesn't interfere with your ability to listen to the person. And in fact, because your mind is less likely to be wandering off into more content-rich domains, you're actually able to stay steadier with what the person is saying. And finally, I'll share, in the morning when you wake up, it can be a nice little practice. And in the evening before you go to bed, it could be a nice little practice. So that's a way to really get it down. And also have it where it can be a nice way to transition to waking up and getting out of bed. And it can be a nice way to transition to falling asleep. And with practice, and when it becomes really something that you are able to zero in on quickly, you may even find that if you wake up in the middle of the night and you want to fall back asleep, you could do this a series of times and it could facilitate sleep. You also, please know that while 1 through 6 in that 1 minute frame is like a bite-sized nugget that I think is very useful, you could go to 12 and have it be 2 minutes, or 18 and have it be 3 minutes, and so on. So you can make it longer if you'd like, and you could also make it shorter if you'd like. Alrighty, I hope this is helpful. Wishing you well. And now if you'd like, you can watch a couple of demonstrations of the practice. So to demonstrate the practice where I will integrate and coordinate the count with the slower breathing, because you can't see my breathing, I'm going to raise my hand up on the inhalation and lower my hand on the exhalation. So you'll see this happen 6 times. Each time it happens, about 10 seconds will pass. In total, it'll be about a minute. And so it looks like this. Okay, and so that was 6 breaths, and they were paced at probably about 5 seconds for every 6 breaths for a passage of about a minute. That is the present moment pivot, how it looks in practice. I indicated earlier that the breath need not be coordinated with it, where you would just note to yourself at roughly the same slow pacing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, while your breathing would be doing whatever your breathing would be doing. So while I encourage you to practice it with the breath and bring the two together, because I think that that's very useful for a variety of reasons, it's not necessary. And if for any reason you find it difficult to slow down the breath or to coordinate the two, then don't worry. Just slowly count internally to 6, up and back, and then work your way to doing that a total of 6 times. Alrighty. Many people I have shared the present moment pivot with in this form have found it to be very helpful for a variety of reasons. I think you will too. It is not meant to be the practice of a lifetime. It's not meant to be the thing that you're always doing. It's not meant to be this continual counting that can be rigid, that can feel a little bit overly structured and constrained. You could look at it as training wheels in a way. I do think that it can be a practice that you can draw upon from time to time over the course of a lifetime, but it is not meant to be the mindfulness practice. It's meant to be a starter in this regard. It's meant to help us become acclimated and accustomed to the passage of a minute. And it is helpful to start this process of developing a regular mindfulness practice. Among other things, you might find that as you're endeavoring to do a practice every day or 5 practices a week, that one day comes along where you just feel like you don't have the time, or you're feeling a little bit too agitated, or you think you'll come back to it later, but maybe you will and maybe you won't. But you have allocated that same time in the same place to do, say, the 6-minute or the 12-minute mindfulness practice that you're learning and you're practicing on a regular basis. Well, rather than just skip over it, take your seat, do the present moment pivot to 6, or if you want to 12 to make it 2 minutes, or 18 to make it 3 minutes, so you can keep track of the time even without a timepiece, because of the way it's structured. And even if you do it for that period of practice for just the 1 minute, you're getting your practice in, and that's a huge win. All right, hope this is helpful. Wishing you well.